everyone, and welcome to November's Meet the Creator picture book edition. And have I got a stunning book to talk to you about today? I am so excited. I'm actually going to be interviewing today Anna Wilson and Carolina Rabei about A Story of the Seasons, which is a huge book, and I'm very excited to share it with you. So welcome, Anna, and welcome, Carolina.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to talk to us today. So to start us off, we usually ask our authors to read a little bit from the book. So Anna, are you happy to do that for us?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to read from pages 48 and 49, which is in the summer section. And it's about on the river and looking in depth at eels, which I just became absolutely fascinated by when I was doing research for the book. And I think you'll see why. Eels are incredible, mysterious fish which live in rivers. For centuries, their life cycle was a puzzle to scientists. Nobody knew how or where they had babies. It seemed that adult eels suddenly appeared in rivers, as though from nowhere. An ancient Greek philosopher called Aristotle even believed that they sprang out of the muddy riverbeds. About 100 years ago, it was discovered that adult eels actually make a very long journey down the river each summer, across the ocean to one particular place called the Sargasso Sea to breed. Their babies, called larvae, go on to make an equally incredible journey back to the river again. Life in the river. Eels spend most of their early adult life in freshwater, feeding upstream in rivers. At this point in their life, they're known as yellow eels, as their skin has a yellowish colour. They can spend more than 20 years here, feeding on fish and invertebrates. Then, once they reach adulthood and are ready to breed, they begin their long migration downstream towards the sea, setting off. The eels usually start their long journey on a moonless night in late summer, after there's been heavy rainfall. This means that the rivers will be higher and the water will flow faster. As they migrate, the eels change. Their bellies turn silver, their nostrils and eyes get bigger, and their intestines change so that they do not need to feed.
How absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Magic.
I would never have thought that, that such a thing could happen. And as something that we all think we know quite well. We think we know about eels, let's face it, but there are so many things there that I was just like, really? Do they really do that? Mm-hmm. So, obviously the book is chock-a-block full of fascinating facts like that. So I assume quite a lot of research was involved. So how long was the book in the planning, and did you have to do all of that research yourself, Anna?
I did. Luckily, I love reading and I'm fascinated with the natural world. So it wasn't exactly a chore. It was an absolute pleasure. And my son is a natural scientist and has been obsessed with nature since he was tiny. So I've got his entire library of amazing books that over the years we and grandparents have bought for him. So that was a really good starting point. Everything from Collins Gems right through to massive encyclopedias, books specifically about birds, that sort of thing. So I started in books, which is where I always like to start. And then looking at the internet and cross-referencing lots of things, because it's very, very important to double, triple, quadruple check your facts these days, just to make sure you haven't just taken an idea from somebody that isn't entirely true. So I think the planning took a few months, because I had to have a back and forth with the editors about whether we were going to have big pages like the eel page, or whether we were going to have lots of pages with little tiny facts about different things. And we sort of worked that out together. We knew it was 4 seasons, obviously. We wanted 7 habitats as well. So, and then 14 spreads per season. So that was our sort of basic plan. And then after I'd written the whole thing, which took about a year, the National Trust got involved. They have an amazing team of scientists and fact checkers. So they then went through everything to check again. And even then they would say, I don't know where you got this from. So I'd have to sort of go back and say, well, I got this from the RSPB and the World, Wildlife Fund and all these other, reputable things. And even then they'd say, oh, well, actually, we now believe this. And then they'd give us some article from the New Scientist or something else, So there was a lot of back and forth to make sure. So we really hope everything in this has been absolutely fact-checked into submission.
It sounds like a hell of a lot of work, but so worth it. So worth it. So, Carolina, your illustrations are just stunning. Absolutely stunning. And I am totally in love with the pages with the foxes. I love the foxes. But can you talk us through your artistic process, please? So do you create your art digitally or do you work on canvas?
Yeah, it's done digitally. I do start with sketches on the paper, like little thumbnails, but then my roughs are done digitally just because it's easier to adjust things. When I send my work to the designer and the editor, they would have some feedback. Some elements have to be increased or decreased or moved around. So yeah, digitally it's much easier, especially with a book like this of this size.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then all the color is done digitally. I try to add texture so it has that handmade feel, so it doesn't look too digital and computer made. But yeah, with textures, some scanned in, some brushes these days, even if they're like on the computer, they look quite natural. So yeah, that's mostly my process.
It certainly does, because I would not have believed it was digitally produced, that artwork. It doesn't look like that at all, as you say, because you are very good at getting those textures in. And I love the colour palette as well, because the way it changes with the seasons, but it stays quite a muted colour palette, and I really love that. I love the look of that. I thought it was beautiful. So what about for yourself, Anna? Because I know obviously a lot of your previous books are fiction, but and I'm guessing the writing process with non-fiction is very different. Have you got a preference?
Oh gosh, it's like asking me what's my favourite book that I've written, or which is your favourite child. I just love them all equally because I've put my heart and soul into every single one of them. I think what was lovely about being asked to write non-fiction was it was such a challenge. So actually, my first non-fiction book was this almanac for the National Trust that came out for 2019, and I ended up updating it for 5 years. And I remember when my agent said, how do you feel about doing this? I said, you must be joking. I know nothing about writing non-fiction. And she had to sort of talk me into it. And now I look back and think, what was I so frightened of? But I think I know how to structure a story. I've known that for a long time. I'm not saying that makes it easy, but I've got a feel for how a story should unfold. And I had no feel for how a non-fiction book should unfold. So I obviously did a lot of research reading a vast array of other people's non-fiction. But with the almanac, and this book, I was almost given free rein to start with as to how the pages were going to look. And that terrified me because that really was the blank page, It wasn't so much the research, because that was obviously a pleasurable thing and there's lots of information out there to look at. But the idea that someone was going to say to you, well, what do you think this page should look like? And I'm just not a visual person. I love drawing just for fun, but I can't do what Carolina does. And I certainly can't look at a page like a designer does. So that was sort of frightening, really. But it's a really good thing to get out of your comfort zone and try new things. And I've learned so much, not just facts about nature, but how a book is produced. So I've been published for 25 years. So to learn something completely new was lovely. It keeps the brain working.
Well, I certainly think as well, reading it myself, each section reads like a story.
Oh, good.
It probably comes from your previous fiction writing. And I think that's a great way of presenting facts for children. So, okay, Carolina, I'm going to come back to you now. So, do you have a favourite spread in the book? And why is it your favourite one?
I do have a few favourites. I must say I do love autumn in general. So probably the autumn chapter was my favourite to work on because of obviously the lovely autumny colours. Probably even, the first spread of the autumn chapter, that would be page 66. It's my favourite. I think it just maybe takes me back to my childhood. having some nice walks in the forest with my family. So yeah, just that cozy feel of a nice sunny, warm day of autumn and the lovely color palette. That probably is my favorite. Though I do love all the season in different ways, but autumn is probably the closest to my heart. So yeah, therefore that would be probably my favorite one.
I love the colours of autumn as well. I can quite see why you'd say that. I do love the colours of autumn. What about yourself, Anna?
I think for me, my favourite spread is Summer on the River, which is 46 to 47. Not least because Carolina sent me the artwork for this, which I'm very, very grateful. So that's going to be framed and put on my wall.
Well, now we're all envious.
But I think also because I live in Cornwall, and I loved autumn when I lived up country, but in Cornwall we don't get the autumn colours because the leaves just die and fall, so we don't get lovely golds and bronzes and everything. Whereas the summer in Cornwall is really something else if you're lucky with the weather. And we've got beautiful estuaries that come into the county, and we do see these beautiful waders. And so this spread is very evocative for me of a beautiful walk in summer along an estuary in Cornwall and seeing the oyster catchers and egrets. And yeah, I'm absolutely blown away by this spread. And in fact, on the PDF, I don't think it does it justice because the colour in the book is just so warm. You could feel the warmth on your skin as you look at it. It's just gorgeous.
But with the spread that you liked best, Carolina, something else I just want to comment on is the brilliant representation in the book, and the beautiful pictures. We've got all colours of people, we've got disabilities, we've got goodness only knows what, and I think that is so well done, and it's beautiful, absolutely perfect, perfectly pitched, in my opinion. So are we okay to ask you what you're working on next?
Yes, I am working on quite an interesting project. It's about actually a dog, Judy, the war dog. So it was on in the World War II. It joined the soldiers and was helping the soldiers to give them signs if there was enemies near. She even helped them find water on an island when they were trapped. It's with text by Tom Palmer. And it's going to be published next year. So yeah, that's what I'm working on now. It's quite an exciting and a bit different project, but yeah, it's great to illustrate this book about a war hero.
Sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
And Tom's so good at that sort of war fiction type stuff, isn't he? And well, obviously this one's more factual, but
yeah, his first picture book, I think.
Yeah, it will be. Oh, exciting!
Yeah.
Exciting. So Anna, this is going to be a difficult one, but it may not be difficult for you. What was the most surprising fact that you found out? Was it from the eels, or were there other things that you found out that you thought, well, goodness me, I never knew that?
Well, yeah, the eels, definitely. I had no idea about the moonless night, and I kept thinking, how do eels just know that on a moonless night that's the best time to go? And then the more I read about it and thought about it, I thought, well, of course they'll sense the tide rising and all of that sort of thing as well. But even that, I mean, I just think, we don't need to make up magic. There's so much in the natural world which is just mind-blowing. I know people fans of David Attenborough's films will know that every time you find out a new fact, you just think, I can't believe this. But then on a much more sort of day-to-day level, the thing that fascinated me was that urban foxes have evolved to be a different shape to rural foxes. So foxes in the city, they have to scavenge for food from humans in a way that foxes in the countryside don't. So foxes in the countryside tend to be leaner and skinnier and have pointier noses and faces, which is the sort of fox that you think of, the traditional fox, if you like. Whereas foxes in cities have evolved so that their heads are boxier and sort of more compact. And that's because it's then easier for them to nose off a bin lid and get in and steal rubbish food. And that's, they've had to do that. And they're stockier, their legs are a little bit shorter. They're a completely different shape. And actually, I spend half my time in London, and so I'm very used to foxes sitting on the fence outside the back door. And, the other day I saw one outside Wagamama's on Shepherd's Bush Road, and they're very different from the ones we get here. Their personalities are different. Everything about them is different. So seeing that sort of evolution is incredible. Yeah.
It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. You know, actually seeing evolution as it's happened, if you like.
Yeah.
As you say, there is so much magic in this world that we just don't think about. We really don't. And are we allowed to ask you, what are you working on next?
Well, I have got a children's book out on submission at the moment, which means that I'm hoping publishers are reading it. So I probably shouldn't say anything about that because I might jinx. But I've got a picture book coming out only in Cornwall, actually, in the spring. And it's also about a dog. And the reason it's only in Cornwall is that the dog is called Dreckley, which won't mean much to people elsewhere in the country. But it's a Cornish word that is a bit like manana. It's sort of like, yeah, we'll do it Dreckley. We'll do it. And the dog only comes when people say the word Dreckley. That's all I'll say, just in case any Cornish people are watching. It's a bit of a funny book, and I'm really looking forward to that being out in Cornwall in the spring. And then the other thing I'm working on is an adult novel. So I'm editing that at the moment and hoping I might sell that to somebody.
Very different. Well, unfortunately, the time has absolutely flown by, as it always does in these interviews. So thank you very much, both of you, for coming along to share about the book. What I would say to those watching, it is the most stunning book. It is so beautiful. And if you're going to buy it for someone for Christmas, buy 2 copies because you won't want to let it go. So you'll need one for yourself. So congratulations on such a wonderful book. And well, I suppose it's now the time I can say Happy Christmas to you both. There we are. We're nearly there.
Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our middle grade session for Meet the Creator November. And this time I'm going to be talking to Rachel Burge about her very atmospheric middle grade book, which is called Whispering Hollow. Welcome, Rachel. Thanks very much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you for inviting me.
But of course. Are you happy to start us off with a bit of a reading to give us an idea, please? Thank you.
Definitely. So I'm going to read the very opening of the book. Old Mam Spriggan sleeps under a blanket of leaves, held like a seed, tight as a secret. Now and then she twitches out a gnarly leg. Sometimes her long twig fingers scratch her head, dislodging a millipede burrowing in her brain. For days and nights through rain and shine she slumbers, giving herself back to the land until she's needed. While she sleeps, her mind fills with rotting things, mulch and manure, maggots and mould, putrid fluids and pungent juices, reeking with a sweet, rich tang of decay. She dreams of the spinning earth and scudding clouds, sunrise and moonbeams, cycles and seasons, longing for a time when she wasn't the last of her kind. Best of all is when she dreams of the girl. She hugs herself with rough bark arms and grins when she thinks of the child's long auburn hair and eyes the colour of a mountain lake. How she'd like to taste those eyes, pluck them out, unroll them between her fingers, feel them slide cool and juicy down her throat. Mum can't remember exactly when she was last called into life, for time disintegrates quickly when you're in the ground. But she recalls that long hot summer week as if it happened only yesterday. The girl's trespass had caused her to wake in the usual way, the angry, dark magic filling her with fury and summoning her to protect the glade. Her heart had beaten raw and ravenous with cruelty, yet she'd only watched the child. The girl was nothing like the others who'd been foolish enough to enter her domain. She dug her hands into the crumble-soft soil and laughed when a spider crawled up her arm. She swam the river in a thunderstorm and climbed the broken oak tree at night. She skipped through dew-wet grass and spun in circles, giddy on the magic of dawn. Few humans humans were able to see Old Man, yet the girl had. If only the child had spoken to her that night. If only there was a way to get close to her. Turning over, she wheezes a raspy chuckle, then buries her face into the dirt and murmurs excitedly to the earthworms. Next time she'll speak to me, I'll make sure of it. Next time she'll be mine.
Wow, how wonderful. There is nothing better for a reader than to hear an author reading from their own book. So thank you very much for that. It was such a treat.
Thank you.
I absolutely love your writing because it paints such vivid pictures in my mind. I think your descriptions are just wonderful. And obviously the story is very based on mythology and is very mystical. So is it based on any existing myths that you'd heard of, or was it inspired by anything else?
Yes, so it's all based on traditional fairy folklore, and in particular Cornish fairy folklore. So as I was doing some research, I discovered that fairies or hidden people are often said to live at ancient stone sites, so things like standing stones and barrows. And apparently there's more of these in Cornwall than the rest of Europe. So that gave me the idea to set it in Cornwall. And as I was looking into Cornish folklore, I discovered that they have these creatures called spriggan, which are described as tree-like beings, and they act as bodyguards to the fairies. So fairies could be pretty mean and horrible, but these spriggan were even worse. So if you trespassed on fairy land or stole their treasure, they were the ones who'd come and punish you. And in particular, they were said to be the creatures that stole a human child and replaced it with a fairy changeling. So your child one day would look and sound normal, but actually you'd have a fairy in your midst and you wouldn't know it.
Do you know, this reminds me so much, and it's just reminded me, just as we're speaking, when I was a child, I had a poetry book, which I still have here somewhere, of mythical poems. And my favourite poem in it was called The Changeling.
Oh.
And that's just struck a chord with me, because that was the whole premise of the poem, of course, was about someone being taken away and being replaced.
Yeah, it is quite an unsettling thought, isn't it, that the person that you know really might be completely different. So
very much so, you know. And for your main protagonist, I mean, it's really worrying, isn't it? Because it's a close member of her family.
Yes, it's a brother.
So I really enjoyed the darkness of it and the sense of impending doom, which really does build through the story. The suspense is just fantastic. So when you read yourself, are you a lover yourself of dark fantasy?
I love dark books, horror, ghost stories, anything like that. I don't tend to read high fantasy, but I like anything that's set in the real world that has some sort of dark, unsettling element to it. So there's a couple of books that really inspired Whispering Hollow, and one of them is Lanny by Max Porter, and the other one is You Let Me In by Camilla Bruce. And both of them are beautifully written, but they have this very otherworldly, strange aspect going on and sort of very dark undercurrents and themes.
And I found it really interesting that, as you say, now that you say that it's come from like Cornish mythology, that the fairies are not friendly, happy beings in it.
No, so often they're not. No,
it's the real opposite of what you expect to find, because you expect, well, come on, we're looking at Tinkerbell. We're looking at Tinkerbell, and your fairies are definitely not Tinkerbell.
No, they're at the other end of the spectrum.
yeah, very much so, yeah. One of the themes I found was really strong for me reading the book was the one of family and relationships. Of course, obviously, the sibling one is very strong in there, but also the grown-up father and son relationship. Is there a reason why you wanted to explore these sort of family type themes?
I think I'm really drawn to horror, but my favourite kind of scary story is one that has like a healing aspect, so that the characters come out changed and better for the experience. And I think that's particularly important with middle grade. So if I was going to put my characters through an ordeal, I wanted all of them to be in a better place by the end. So Pippa has a much better relationship with her brother. But then I was thinking that Grandpa goes through an awful lot as well. And I wanted his ending to have this sense of healing, so that the whole family, the entire unit is brought together at the end, and it becomes like this thing that we went through was awful, but actually now we're all in a much better place.
Yeah, I totally agree that the way that all becomes resolved, if you like, in the end, and it's a very hopeful ending. It's a very hopeful, positive ending, I find, at the end of the book.
Yeah, thank you.
And of course, there's also the theme of bullying, which we don't realise until further on in the book. And I'm trying not to say too much about some things because I don't want to give away too many spoilers. It's so hard, isn't it? There you go. But I also wanted to give a shout out to Catherine Peterson's cover illustration, because I just think it's so beautiful. So beautiful, the way it wraps around, and it's so gorgeous and so detailed. In fact, for those of you that are watching, there we are. This is the very illustration I'm talking about. Were you pleased with it?
Yes, I love it. I love all the little details around the edges. So there's like little spiders with eyeballs for a body, and there are moths with skeleton bodies, and all of these things are introduced in the story when Pippa goes into the fairy underworld. So it's really nice to have all the little details on the cover, so as you're reading it you can think, yes, you can see how that comes into the story.
I have to say, the thought of those eyeball spiders
they're awful, aren't they?
They are very creepy. Very creepy. I don't like spiders anyway.
No, one that blinks and stares at you is even worse.
Definitely even worse. Definitely even worse. So, okay, just a bonus question here. So we are coming up to, well, you can see it's already very festive here. It's my favourite season, and yeah, there are Christmas decorations everywhere, Rachel, as there have been for 2 weeks. But there we go. So, have you got any recommendations of festive reads that you enjoyed?
Every year I watch and sometimes read just Dickens' A Christmas Carol because I love it. And I've already been to see a production of it. We went a couple of weeks ago in London, which was a thing where you have a Victorian feast and then someone acts.
I've heard about that.
Amazing props. It's called The Lost Estate. I've wanted to go for years, so it's a bit on the pricey side, and we actually went. And it was amazing. I just love that story every year. Never tires, never gets old for me. Whether it's the Muppets Christmas Carol or an old black and white, yeah.
Well, I have to say ditto, because it is my favourite book in the whole wide world.
Is it?
And I reread it every
story.
I do.
Story. And somehow ghost stories work at Christmas. So,
well, I reread it every year, or I'll listen to it on an audiobook. Last year I did the audiobook, which was read by, believe it or not, Hugh Grant.
Really?
Which I was a little bit like, really? But he did a very good job of it, I have to say.
Well, he's just in a new horror movie, isn't he? That Heretic. Yeah. Which I kind of think, can he play? Could I be scared by Hugh Grant after he's been in Paddington and things? But yeah.
Yeah, the Paddington scary film. Yeah, don't really compute, do they?
Direction, yeah.
But no, I'm totally with you on Christmas Carol, and I'm so envious that you got to go to that in London, because I've seen, same as yourself, I've seen it advertised, and I've never got round to it. But next year's a biggish birthday for me.
Okay.
So perhaps I'll use that as an excuse why we need to go. And
lots of people dress up. There are lots of men in top hats and ladies in bonnets. So you can go for it. And I love things like that.
Wonderful. It just sounds so fabulous. Absolutely. I'm not going to get there this year, but maybe next year. Well, the time, as always, has absolutely flown. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about Whispering Hollow. I suppose the last question would be, what are you working on at the moment? Or are we allowed to ask you what you're working on at the moment? Or is it a secret?
It's not a secret because I haven't got very far. I'm just brainstorming ideas, and I'm thinking of a YA horror, something really well known, but a fresh take on it. So I'm just
Excellent.
racking my brains for ideas at the moment.
Well, that sounds wonderful. We do love a bit of YA horror. We do love a bit of YA horror. Thank you so much for coming to talk to
Thank
us.
you for having me.
And as you know, it's very festive here. I guess I should finish by saying Happy Christmas.
Oh, thank you. Happy Christmas to you too, and everyone watching.